Alright guys, question number 15. So question number 15 wants us to find the average rate of change from an equation. So it says, find the average rate of change of the function over the intervals provided below. So it says g of x is equal to x squared minus 2x minus 2 over this interval. Alright? So whenever you're finding average rate of change, you're looking at the change in your y values. Alright? So again, you're looking at the change in your y values divided by the change in your x values. Alright? To evaluate the change in your y values, you do y2 minus y1. And to evaluate the change in your x values, you do x2 minus x1. Alright? So here we were given some interval for x's. So this can be considered your x1. And this can be considered your x2. Alright? So we have our x and our two x values. But we don't have the y values. So we need to try to find the y values that goes with each of these x values. And that is why we were given this equation. Okay? So what I'm going to do, guys, is find the y value that goes with this positive 2. So to find that y value, I'm going to rewrite this equation, and I'm going to replace all the x's with parentheses 2. So I'm going to rewrite this equation. I see an x squared, so I'm going to write parentheses 2 squared. And then I'm going to rewrite the negative 2. I see an x, so I'm going to write parentheses 2. And I'm rewriting the negative 2. So all I'm doing, guys, is replacing this 2 with x. Alright, so replace with x's. Alright. So now I'm going to go ahead and calculate. Alright, so again, I'm first calculating g of 2. Okay. So when I calculate 2 squared, I would get 4. Alright. Negative 2 times positive 2 is negative 4. And the negative 2 I would bring down. Alright? I'm writing it across because I'm trying to use up all my space. Okay? So 4 minus 2 is 0. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Alright? And again, you can just put this in your calculator and it will calculate it for you. Alright? So that means when I plugged in positive 2 for that x, I got negative 2 for the y that goes with it. Alright? So let's actually put that with my formula. So again, let's draw that formula down here. So again, my formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And a lot of times I set it up a little bit like this, where I write some fraction, a negative sign in between, because that's what my formula says. And then I write 2 parentheses at the top and the bottom on the right side. Okay? So again, this was my x2. So my x2 was positive 2, and the y that goes with it was negative 2. So on the top, I would put the y that goes with it, negative 2. And underneath, I put what I plugged in, alright? And I plugged in positive 2, alright? So that's what I plugged in. That's my x2, alright? So now, I'm going to go ahead and find my second y that goes with my x, okay? So to do this, guys, I'm going to find g of negative 5, okay? So that means, all that means that anywhere I see x, I'm going to plug in negative 5. So instead of writing x, I would write parentheses, negative 5 squared. I would rewrite the negative 2, but instead of x, I would write parentheses, negative 5. And then I rewrite the negative 2, okay? Negative 5 squared is negative 5 times negative 5, which is positive 25, because a negative times a negative gives me a positive. Negative 2 times negative 5, a negative times a negative gives me positive 10. And then the minus 2, I bring it down. Okay? 25 plus 10 is 35. 35 minus 2 is 33. Okay? So this is the y that goes with when x is negative 5. So for the y1, I would plug in 33. And for the x1, I plug in the negative 5 that I plugged in inside of the parentheses. Okay? So now I'm going to calculate. Alright? So negative 2 minus 33 is negative 35. Here I see a negative that's exactly right beside another negative. So that's going to turn into a positive. So what's 2 plus 5? 7. All right. And negative 35 can be divided by 7. Negative 35 divided by positive 7 is negative 5. So my answer for my average rate of change, all right, would be negative 5. So again, guys, that's the answer. Okay? So let's do the same thing for the next question, guys. Again, this can be tricky, so make sure you're following all my steps, okay? So again, guys, let's label some things. So again, this would be my x1, this would be my x2, all right? It doesn't matter which one you choose as your x1 or x2, but I like to represent it like this, okay? So I need to find the y's that go with them so that I can use my formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, all right? So let's just write up our setup just so that we don't get confused. So we have a negative sign in between because that's what my formula says, all right? And then I'm going to put 2 parentheses out here, all right, at the top and the bottom on the right side, okay? So again, it says h of x is equal to this equation over this interval. So let's first define what h of 6 is. So I'm going to replace all the x's with parentheses 6. So in front of here is a negative 1, the same as in front of here is a negative 1. So I'll write negative 1 instead of x. I'll write parentheses 6. Rewrite the squared. Don't forget to rewrite the squared. Then a negative 1. I see another x. So I write parentheses 6. And then I rewrite my positive 3. Okay? So let's go and let's calculate. All right? So you always do the squared first because, again, in order of PEMDAS, so again, in order of PEMDAS, okay, we would have to try to evaluate the exponent because we cannot calculate anything inside the parentheses. Then we multiply by that negative 1. 6 squared is 6 times 6, which is 36. 36 times negative 1 is negative 36. Okay? Negative 1 times 6. Again, this is not 6 squared, okay, because this is just the x2. So negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. And the positive 3, I bring it down, okay? Negative 36 minus 6 gives me a bigger negative, negative 42. Negative 42 plus 3 gives me a smaller negative, which would be negative 39, okay? So that means when I plugged in 6, I got negative 39. So that means my x2 is negative 39, or rather my y2 is negative 39, and the x that goes underneath it is positive 6. Okay? So now let's find h of negative 4. Okay? So I'll write negative 1, replace x with parentheses negative 4 squared, and I write negative 1. I see a x, I write parentheses negative 4, then I see a plus 3. Okay? So I'm going to do the squared first. So negative 4 squared is positive 16. 16 times negative 1 is negative 16. Negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4. And the 3, I bring it down. Negative 16 plus 4 gives me negative 12. Negative 12 plus 3 is negative 9. All right? So again, when I plugged in negative 4, I got negative 9. So my y1 is negative 9. Okay? And the x that goes underneath it is negative 4. Okay? So now I calculate. I see a negative beside another negative. So that's going to turn into a positive. So negative 39 plus 9 is negative 30. I see a negative beside another negative. That's going to turn into a positive. So 6 plus 4 is 10. Negative 30 divided by 10 is negative 30. All right. So my average rate of change, all right, would be negative 3.